Well, it's finally happened. We've finally got our very first Metroid Prime game on the Nintendo Switch. Although, funnily enough, it's not the one that was announced in 2017. Instead, we've got Metroid Prime Remastered, which is the very first 3D game in the series that came out way back on the GameCube, something like 20 years ago. If you're not familiar with these games, they do follow a very similar format to the 2D Metroid games. So you lose your powers, you're sort of in an undiscovered place that you have to explore and slowly gain your powers back, and you use these powers to explore new locations that were previously locked off to you, and that's sort of how the progression system works, really. And right off the bat, I think we have to say that this remaster looks absolutely incredible. You could even really call it a remake. The line is a bit blurred between remake and remaster, but it's definitely much more than just a resolution upscale. You know, they've not just boosted it up to 1080p, it looks fully rebuilt. The textures are gorgeous, the visuals are stunning, there's all sorts of great lighting effects. It just looks really, really well done. There's all these neat little features like if you go past some steam, your visor will fog up, or the way the rain falls off your arm cannon. It honestly just looks really, really incredible, and I think they've done a really good job with it. I don't have a way to check this for sure, but it feels like it's running at 60 FPS basically the whole time in both handheld and docked, and I think it looked equally as impressive in both handheld and docked. I mostly played this game docked, and I did play it handheld occasionally. Sometimes it felt a little bit too dark to play in handheld. I'm not sure if that's just because I was playing it on OLED or what. It wasn't there the whole time, just it happened occasionally that it was a bit too dark. But yeah, as I say, I mostly played it on docked, and I'm going to get into what I thought of it. So just a few things that I wanted to cover about this review. So this isn't an impressions video, this is a review. I played the game all the way through to the end, and I will show my completion card on the screen. I've recorded my own gameplay for the first time. I've not done this before, but I recorded the first hour of gameplay. That's what I'll show. I won't show anything past the first hour because I'm worried about spoiling the game. I know it's a 20-year-old game, but I think a lot of people are going to be coming into this fresh, so I'm going to try and not spoil anything. There will be one section partway through where I do talk about spoilers. I'll talk about the end of the game. That will be clearly marked, and I will also say it beforehand, so hopefully you'll be able to avoid that. And then very quickly, just to sort of explain where I'm coming from with this game. So I didn't play the original game. I've not really played any of the 3D Metroids. I did have one on the Wii. It must have been 2 or 3 because I definitely don't recognize it after playing number 1. I didn't get very far with it though, and that's sort of my entire relationship with the 3D Metroid games. When it comes to the 2D ones, I played Fusion for a little while back on the Game Boy Advance, but it was a bit complicated for my young self, and also it was a bit freaky. There were some moments in that game that definitely scared me, so I didn't get very far with that. And then recently I have played Dread, played it all the way through, and I really enjoyed Dread. So that's just sort of to give you an idea of where I'm coming from. I liked Dread, but I haven't really got a proper opinion on the rest of the Metroid games just because I haven't had a chance to experience them. So first of all, I want to talk about the world and the story of Metroid Prime Remastered. I've already mentioned that graphically the world looks incredible, Talon looks amazing. I don't really have anything negative to say about the visuals and the graphics. I think they've done a really good job, like I said. The atmosphere of the world though is also incredible. This is something that I had heard previously, but it's really good. They really do sort of give you that feeling of isolation. You're alone in this alien world, learning about it, you know, trying to piece together what's happened and where you have to go. And I think that works really well. I think that's only heightened by the music. I think the music matches each area. Each zone has its own different music, and they sort of evoke a different feeling in you. At least they did in me anyway. The overworld music gives you this sense of like exploration. You want to go and discover things. It sort of comes across like that. The Magmore Caverns, that's kind of, it's a bit sinister, it's a bit brooding, it's sort of a bit darker. You know, it's ominous, I suppose I would say. And then, you know, there's an ice area, and that's sort of got a bit of a twinkling soundtrack to it, and I think that works well as well. Overall, yeah, music's very good. I think it works nicely. I'm going to have that Magmore Caverns backing music in my head for days, just going round and round and round. It's been like that the whole week. The story then. So there's not really a lot of story in this game. There wasn't really a lot of story in Dread either, so that's not too much of a surprise. I do tend to like story in games. I think I've said that before if you've watched any of my previous videos. I usually need story to sort of pull me along. At the start of the game, you're on a station. some stuff happens and it crashes down on the world of Talon, and you go down and you're sort of exploring to see what's going on. I will say I was kind of confused by Samus's motivations. I don't know if it's just because it's an old game, but you're on the space station, and this isn't really a spoiler because it happens very quickly. You're on the space station, it crashes down, Meta Ridley escapes. So at first I thought maybe Samus's motivation was that she was hunting Meta Ridley, but then he doesn't really appear very much during the game, and it seems like a coincidence when he does show up. Like, it doesn't feel like everything's been leading to Meta Ridley, it just kind of seems like a coincidence. So yeah, I'm a bit confused by Samus's motivation in the game, but I will say that scanning the world to sort of piece together different areas of lore and to find out things about different creatures, and you can scan computers, that's a really good mechanic. I really like that. I've never encountered that in a game before, and now that I have, I kind of want it to be in more games. It's a really good way of letting you have more lore from a world without sort of shoving it down your throat and forcing you to watch cutscenes or read pages and pages of text. It's just a little bit at a time that you can scan. You could do things like scan computers, and then you get to find out what the pirates are thinking about Samus or what experiments they've been doing here, that kind of thing. I really like that mechanic. I think that's good. So there isn't much of a story, but there is a way to sort of find out about lore and piece together bits of story, I suppose, even if there's not like an overarching story through the game. So the next section I want to talk about is sort of the gameplay, the combat and controls. And I will say that combat's not really the strongest section of the game. I think that's kind of generally agreed from what I've been reading. Combat isn't really why you play this game. There are different control schemes, so if you want, you can play with twin sticks, you can play with motion controls. I played twin sticks the whole way through, so it's kind of like lock-on shooting. You hold the left trigger to lock on and then you shoot, and it works fine. Some of the controls are a bit sluggish, so things like changing weapons, that can feel a little bit awkward. You have to hold the X button and use the D-pad to change it. It's a bit slow. Sometimes it doesn't work quite the way you want it to, especially in combat. And then little things like, it feels like it takes forever for you to come out of the morph ball. You sort of have this whole animation of getting up and then the camera slides back in through your visor. It just seems to take a while before you can actually do anything again. So there's just a few little sluggish moments like that. On the whole, it works fine, especially for an older game. I don't know if maybe it changes throughout Prime 2 or 3. It's not really the highlight, that's for sure. I did also feel like enemies didn't really get harder in an interesting way. They sort of got harder by making you switch which weapon you used against them, or they flew around all over the place and made the lock-on targeting quite difficult to work. You lock on, you fire. By the time that your attack reaches them, they've kind of zipped around somewhere else. And they also, like, towards the end of the game, you seem to have more and more enemies sort of thrown at you, and that kind of feels like the way that they handled an increasing difficulty as the game went on, which it wasn't my favorite. I'm more into interesting enemies that do different things as the game goes along, rather than just more of the same enemies that are resistant to your attack types. Like I said, I'm not sure if this changes in Prime 2 or 3. It's not the highlight, but I will say that most of the boss fights were pretty fun. Most of them had little puzzles to solve. They only were hurt in certain ways or certain areas and things like that, and it was usually pretty rewarding to actually work that out and then defeat the bosses. In order to find out these weaknesses, you would often scan them, which, but going back to what I said, really enjoying scanning, I think this was another clever use of scanning. It really added another layer to those boss fights. So yeah, really liked that aspect of it. They weren't really very difficult though. I only died one time throughout the entire game, and that was specifically to one boss. No spoilers, but it was a very large pirate boss. I think people who have played the game will know what I mean without it sort of spoiling that for everybody else. That was the only time I died, really. Didn't die to the end boss or like falling in lava or anything like that. Just one time to one specific boss. Oh, and I played on normal mode, so it's not like I picked the easy mode or anything like that. So it's not a very challenging game combat-wise. I will say that whenever you have to change visors and use the X-ray or the thermal vision, I didn't like that. I thought that sucked, really. I didn't like how it looked. It kind of felt, it was kind of difficult to look at. And there's certain sections of the game where you have to be in these visors for like a long period of time, which kind of didn't feel great. I didn't mind having to use them to work out certain things, like there's certain puzzles that you use the visors to work out. That's fun and that's fine, but when you're sort of in there for a prolonged period of time, I started to not enjoy it. And also there's a couple of bosses where you have to use that for like a long period of time, and that wasn't so great either. The visors idea is kind of good, but I hope it gets improved upon and changed in the future games. All in all, like I said, I don't really think you're playing this game for the combat. I think you're more playing it for the exploration, the puzzles, that kind of rewarding feeling of progression. If combat is your thing and you really want like sort of like slick shooting mechanics, this might not be the game for you, but if you are into these sort of puzzle elements and exploring and discovering things, that's sort of what you would play this game for, I think. And also a cool alien world with lots of interesting creatures. The lore is good, you just have to dig for it a little bit, so that's kind of what I think who this game would appeal to if you're into that kind of thing. So next I want to talk about the progression and how progression works. I've mentioned it before, but you lose basically all of your powers at the start of the game, and you have to collect the power-ups on the world to sort of get back to full strength. And as you do so, it unlocks new areas. There are doors that you couldn't get through before that you can once you get the right power-up. That kind of thing, if you're familiar with basically any Metroidvania game, then you know what I'm talking about, and this is a Metroid game, so it sort of started the system off. I do think that the power-ups come at a good pace. I was actually kind of surprised how quickly I got my first few. It did keep it quite interesting, especially towards the start, getting new ones and then working out where you had to go. Figuring out the puzzles in order to unlock things was good as well. And I remember having these moments where I unlocked something new, so a new weapon that could unlock a new door, or like a new mechanic like the morph ball, that kind of thing. And then you immediately thinking, oh, I remember a place, a few rooms away where I needed that mechanic, and now I can go back there and see what was behind that door. And that's a really good feeling. That's really fun. That sort of draws you on very well, I think. Where that doesn't work quite so well for me personally is in the second half of the game, when the map gets really big, and so you unlock something new, but you've sort of lost track of where it was that you needed to use it, and it's not always really obvious to do. You can see on the map which doors need what weapon type to unlock, but you can't always see things like if there's a rail you needed to go on or that kind of thing, so it can be quite tricky to work it out sometimes. Yeah, as I said, I just sort of lost track of where I needed to go next, and I didn't always find the map very easy to work out. In fact, I found the map quite difficult to work as I was playing to start with anyway. Towards the end of the game, I had sort of gotten used to the map and I found it a bit easier to navigate, but it definitely wasn't intuitive. Like, what each stick did, I felt should have been flipped around. That was confusing, and just generally how to read it. It took me a while. I do think it's a good map. It's just not really easy to pick up straight away, but that didn't really help with working out where to go for a while either. And so because of this, inevitably there was a lot of backtracking, and I've got mixed feelings on the backtracking. To start with, I didn't like backtracking at all. It kind of annoyed me. And then sort of after like maybe the first quarter towards the first half of the game, I sort of felt like, actually, I know where I'm going. The backtracking's fun because, like I said, I was unlocking these power-ups. I knew exactly where I needed to use them. And so that was kind of fun. You felt like you knew the world, and so backtracking was all right. And then, yeah, again, the second half of the game, I got lost a lot. I didn't know where I needed to use the new power-ups. I backtracked a lot. There were lots of times when I backtracked to the wrong place as well. So, for example, there was one time when I went and I did an entire underwater section, and then it took me a while to get through that, and I got to a certain point, and it turned out that's not where I needed to go. I needed a different power-up as well as the one I just unlocked. So then I had to come all the way back out, and there's no quick way to do that. And that didn't really feel very good. That sort of, I lost motivation for a little bit. There's also these items that you have to collect towards the end of the game that sort of allow you to unlock the ending, and they're not really very obvious where you get them. If I'm honest, I think there are a lot of ones that I would never have worked out, and I did a lot of backtracking, not really knowing where to go. And I will be honest, in the end I did end up consulting a guide a few times, just because I was getting to the point where I was feeling like I didn't want to continue playing, just because I couldn't work it out, and I kept walking back and forth and it was getting really boring. I know that for a lot of veterans it probably feels like quite an easy game. I don't know, just that final hunt for the items didn't really click with me. I just kind of wanted to get it over with, and I didn't want to backtrack all over the place. So it's possible that you might use a guide. I think you can use it without it spoiling the game. It didn't really ruin the game for me. I just sort of looked up where some of the artifacts were to save myself a lot of time going to the wrong place. I'm not sure if this is something specific to Prime 1. That experience could have been a bit tighter with less, if there's less backtracking. Maybe it'll be fixed in Prime 2 and 3. I don't really remember having this issue in Metroid Dread. I know there's backtracking in Metroid Dread, but it didn't feel like the same. It kind of felt like I knew where I was going. It was rare that I got lost. The backtracking felt rewarding rather than sort of stumbling around and hoping you know where you're going. I will say though that once I sort of knew where the last artifact was and I was heading towards it, and then I knew after that where I had to go to sort of get to the end of the game, I did sort of have this feeling of, oh, it's going to be a shame when it's over. So it's almost a shame that sort of backtracking kind of soured the experience a little bit. It took something away from it, I think. Okay, so we come to the section now where I'm going to talk a bit of spoilers. I will timestamp everything so you can skip ahead if you don't want to see those. So I will say the end game boss, the last two bosses really were pretty spectacular, at least visually. They looked really cool, and there was definitely a sense of like, wow, these creatures are incredible. And that's 2 for 2 Metroid games where I've really enjoyed the ending. Dread and now Prime, I've really enjoyed the ending for those. I've liked the end game bosses and sort of what happens around that and after that, and how the game leaves it, I suppose, you know, how it leaves it set up for another one. Ridley and the Metroid Prime were cool boss fights, but they did feel a little bit more like you just sort of had to whittle them down slowly, whereas I guess in like Dread's final boss fight, you know, there were lots of mechanics to sort of dodge and things like that. These ones just felt a bit slower paced, like you were just whittling down chips of health at a time, if that makes sense. But they were still cool bosses, and now I finally understand why the game is called Metroid Prime. You know, that Metroid Prime that you fight at the very end. Not what I expected at all. I honestly had no idea what would be down in the crater, and it was really cool actually to see what it was. I don't really like spiders, and it was a little bit spidery, wasn't it? It was satisfying to beat, I'll say that. Like I said, I've not played 2 or 3, but I do kind of know at some point there's like this dark Samus that happens, and I kind of noticed as the Metroid Prime was dying, it seemed to like tear something away from Samus, so I'm wondering if that is where the dark Samus comes from, if that's the origin of that bad guy for the future games. I don't really think it's dead anyway. It did kind of feel like you escaped as the cavern was collapsing, and maybe the Metroid Prime could have as well. Although confusingly at the end it said that the Chozo's faith in Samus had been rewarded, so I suppose at least it's gone from the planet, even if it's not gone forever. Even at the ending, I'm still a bit confused by Samus's motivations, as I said before. I don't know if she knew that there was a Metroid Prime in the crater, you know, the impact crater, and her mission was to destroy that the whole time. I didn't really get the sense that that was true. I just sort of got the sense that she went down to chase Meta Ridley. Then it was a coincidence that after she found all the Chozo artifacts, Meta Ridley was there, and then it was a coincidence that the Metroid Prime was there. I'm not sure if I've just misunderstood that, so, you know, if I am wrong, let me know down in the comments, because I'm kind of confused by that. Okay, so welcome back if you've just joined us after the spoiler section. No more spoilers now, I promise. Just sort of going to sum up my final thoughts. And leave you with that. Overall, yeah, I did really enjoy the game. There was sort of a slight issue for me with the amount of backtracking. It feels like it could have been a tighter experience. And like I said, I'm not sure if that would be addressed in Prime 2 and 3. It doesn't seem to be there in the 2D Metroid, at least it wasn't in Dread. If you're into Metroidvanias, you enjoy those, you've played things like Hollow Knight, or maybe more recent Metroid games, but you haven't gone back and played this one, I think you will still enjoy it. There's still something there. You know, just be aware of the things I've said that might not be so good. I do think, though, that it's a really good remaster. Honestly, well done to Retro. I think it's an incredible achievement. And it's really good to have this on the Switch now. We seem to be getting a lot of Metroid games on the Switch, which is really good. Because I've sort of always had a curiosity to the series from way back when I played Metroid Fusion, but I never really knew where to play them. So the fact that more and more are coming to Switch, I think, is only a positive. I think at the moment I'm leaning towards liking 2D Metroid more, or maybe that's not fair to say. At least I prefer Dread to Metroid Prime 1 at the moment. Those are the two I've played. Just like I said, Dread feels like a tighter experience, but there's definitely a lot of positives in Metroid Prime, and I would play Prime 2 if like that remaster comes out next, and especially if some of those issues that I've highlighted are addressed in Prime 2 and 3, then, you know, I think those could be some really incredible games. It sort of feels like 1 laid a foundation, and hopefully 2 and 3 could improve upon those, make things a bit tighter, you know. I do have Metroid Samus Returns on the 3DS. I picked that up recently, but I haven't got to play it yet. And with Metroid Fusion coming out on the Game Boy Advance, actually, I think it comes out on the day I'm recording this, so it's already out. So I'm quite tempted to try one of those next to sort of continue my Metroid journey. I've played 2 and I've enjoyed 2, so yeah, I'm definitely interested to dive further into the series. Okay guys, there we go. So those were my thoughts on Metroid Prime Remastered. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think. Have you played the game before and you really enjoyed this remaster? Are you coming new into it? Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.